All right. Good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening. Welcome to Reconnect My Heart podcast, the show that we talk about life's problems that may break or tear our hearts apart. On Reconnect My Heart, we discuss God's answers to life's problems to reconnect our hearts back to the way He originally made us. I'm your host, Brother Prater. I'm so glad you're able to join us. If you have any questions, comments, if you just want to listen to the show, feel free to call me at 888 896 1244. Excuse me, that is 888 896 1244. You must type in the access code 732 666 328 pound. That word spells out reconnect. So 732 666 328, and then press the pound. Also, for those who may want to catch us on social media, you can go to my mobile app, which is available on Android or Apple, as well as my excuse me, it's Brother Prater. Type in Brother Prater and then just go to um podcast, live podcast. I want to thank each and every one of y'all for tuning in, and thank you so much for your love and support. On today, I have a very special guest, someone that I hold dear to my heart as well as my family. Have a lot of regard for him. He's a great minister. That's a great uh, information of finances, very good wealth of knowledge. And today he's going to share with us some great information about something that oftentimes we don't talk about. It's about grief. Today we're going to have our very special guest to come on here and just give us what the Lord want us to have. So I want to introduce to everyone a great man, Minister Bradley Vinson. How you doing today, sir? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. I closed them out just that fast. There you go. Hmm. There you go. How
Hey,
you
hey,
doing today, sir?
I am doing awesome, awesome, awesome. And it's actually a reintroduction. I've been
Yeah,
here a few times with you. So yeah, just
yeah,
happy to be
yeah.
here.
And we're gonna continue to get you up on here. He's been on a he's been on this show about grief, about finances, and also just about life. And so on today, we want to just pick his brains to have him just talk to us about grief. And actually, uh, pretty much what I had shared with him right before we got on the air, he was on my heart when I was in the hospital. Those that know or don't know, I had a cardiac arrest because of a blood clot that went into my lungs and went into my heart. And while I was in the hospital, I thought about him because I experienced something that was unfamiliar. And so, pretty much what I was sharing a few minutes ago, when I was in the hospital, finding out that I was so close to death, and I was already reminiscing about the losing of my father, um, that made me think about the grief pertaining to my father, and then thinking about there's still some unresolved grief pertaining to the loss of my sister. And so I was like, man, and then I was if you want to say finding out, I was discovering that there was a new grief I was dealing with, and that was pertaining to me almost dying. And then also just the the fact of what I knew pertaining to my health, it may or it may not be the same. And so I said, whenever I have a chance, I'm definitely gonna have to have you on the show. Now things have transpired where my health has improved and everything, but just the thought in the very beginning, it made me think about if I experienced that, there may be somebody else that may have experienced the same thing. So I feel like it'll be a great time for us to have that conversation and for you to even just share with us um, how to even process or even be able to identify that.
Yeah, so a lot to chew on. That's a lot to chew on. Yeah, but I'm definitely happy to be here with with you and your audience. And I don't call your audience an audience. Your audience is your family.
Yeah.
And so it's good to just kind of be here with you and your family, man, and share. And hopefully we can bless some people with some content tonight and just give them some guideposts or what I call way markers on this journey of life to kind of help them through what they could be dealing with. Yeah, but as we talked about some of the things from our off air conversation, and we were just kind of saying how we deal with grief, right? And how we deal with loss, whatever that loss is. And it was just kind of a special time. And, we're going to hit some different points here tonight, but just here's a few things. Because I know we talked about this in a general sense about grief. And a lot of times when you say grief due to loss, a lot of people want to attach that to loss due to death. But if we think about it different as a loss due to a transition or something, or to an end of something, it gives grief more breath, so to speak, right? And let more things be covered by grief that sometimes we don't want to attach grief to. Loss of relationship, loss of health, some kind of change dynamic. And even though your initial losses were your sister and your father, losing who you were health wise, right? Or that change or that new lifestyle you have to have due to your health. There's a grieving process of that. And, kind of as we were kind of talking about as an example, right? You used to run marathons and now you had your medical emergency and you can't run marathons anymore, right? You got to walk instead, or you can't do strenuous activities. That's a huge lifestyle change, and you're going to grieve that. And so, you even having the maturity or the fortitude or the spiritual strength to know things are different now and things are changing and it's going to be a rough spell. How do I walk through it? I want to give you honor for that, right? And I want to give you praise for that because you noticed that. You also talked about how the new grief of your health made you think about other things you were grieving. And that's kind of that compounding thing with grief, right? As new aches and pains enter your life, old memories of aches and pains re-enter your life, right? And so now you're grieving not being at your peak health wise, and your body remembers that low feeling, so to speak. And so, what other things made you feel low, right? The loss of your father and loss of your sister. So now that compounds. And now you're thinking about your mortality, and that makes you think about losses. And so all these things kind of compound. And I truly believe at a certain level, you can only grieve one thing at a time. Just like, we can't multitask. We really can't. You just do multiple things at less than peak level. That's what multitasking is. You can't do three things at 100%. You don't have that capacity, right? So how can you grieve your health and your new lifestyle and your father and your sister all at peak level? And so that's what brings you down because your body can't handle all that. And so all these things kind of start to spiral. So I'm so thankful that you saw that and you wanted to address that and you recognize that. So you wanted to bring it in front of other people that may be experiencing similar. So I thank you so much for that, man, and just reaching out to me as a brother, right? And we chop it up and we talk about things we won't even discuss here, to the outside world, so to speak. That's for us. But just even those conversations can bring health, can bring healing, right? And can bring more wholeness. And so it's all those things that that kind of relates to that as we go on this journey. But you know, grieving, as long as you're doing it in a healthy way, you're doing it right. So even though you think you're not progressing as much as you should, right? Or you go backwards some because it's like, man, I have, I had this health issue that put me in a hospital. And while I'm sitting there in that lonely, dark state, right? Because you're in the hospital room by yourself and it's quiet and all you can hear is the machines. Now you're thinking, and that thinking brings on grief. Because just, I mean, to be bluntly honest with you, right? Um, I grieve hardest at night in the quiet, where there's not as many things to take up mind space. And so you start to think about losses, you start to think about your mortality and all those things. And you're like, man, what did I do today that was worth it? Did I waste today? What am I going to do tomorrow? What about the person that's not here with me today? You start thinking about all those different things, and all that's natural. All of that's part of the healing process. All of that's part of being human. And so I want to normalize that for people and just let them know that as long as you're grieving in a healthy way, and these things are healthy, you're doing it the right way. Um, so yeah, so that's it's kind of want to just drive that home for people.
You know, that's necessary for people to know because a lot of times, because one person is grieving one way, if someone else grieving differently, we automatically label them where you're not doing it right.
Right.
You
Or
know,
grieve in the way that you want them to.
right, right, right,
Right.
right.
Yeah. And two people can grieve the same person in dramatically different ways.
Yes.
I believe I told you this because it's been almost 3 years now, 4 years now. At the end of this year, it'll be 4 years. Um, my father transitioned in on December 29th, 2022, and I just have one other brother, and we both had a father that transitioned.
Mhm.
He was a completely different person to each of us because we're completely different people.
Right.
So we're going to grieve that man, daddy, differently.
Mhm.
And so if I look at my brother and I'm sitting and reminiscing and I might start crying, he's like, dude, what you crying for? Or vice versa. Or like, dude, what's the big deal? Well, why are you still grieving? Why ain't you? Or it might be like, well, let's do some stuff that dad likes to do. I ain't into that stuff.
Right.
And my dad loved music, and my brother had a lot of his albums, and my brother gave them to me. And then I listened to him like for 2 or 3 days a lot. And now I had listened to him in a while because I'm not really ready to sit in that. Right. And every time I play a record, it makes me feel like a child because I was a little kid when I first heard her.
Mhm.
And daddy was healthy and young and vibrant. And so it's mixed emotions, right? You reminisce and there's some happiness, but then there's some, well, he's not here. Right. And so, and it's those things. So we have to realize that even though we're grieving the same person, we're going to grieve differently. And both of us had good relationships with them, I believe. But we're different, and so I'm sure we had different rough spots with Daddy. As we aged and became young men or whatever, as teenagers and young men do. But we're all going to grieve the relationship we had because it was awesome. And we're going to grieve the relationship we wish we had if it wasn't awesome. But we're going to grieve.
Mhm.
And we have to give everybody that space to do that. And so that's what I mean about just the whole grief process. And I'm always the fully transparent guy and tell you what I'm going through. Recently, we were having a deep discussion, my wife and I, about grief and where we are with the different losses we've had in our life. And we were just talking about the way markers. And it's like it didn't get as hard, not like that. It's just one day you wake up and it's not as hard, but it's been getting not as hard. But just on that certain day, you noticed it, right? And you don't start harping, so to speak, on the anniversaries of things. It's like, it's just Tuesday and I'm sad. I'm not sad because it's Father's Day, right? Or I'm okay on Father's Day now. But then some other random day, it's like the day he died.
Yeah.
Right. But it's like that's part of the healing process where there's not these little dates on a calendar that you dread. Grief just comes and goes. And we were just kind of talking about how our lives are transitioning from that just deep, entrenched, can't breathe grief to reminiscing grief. And I get sad or I get happy, and remembering them brings a little bit of both. and I never know what I'm gonna get, right? Like Forrest Gump says, like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get, right? And
Right.
so it's that kind of thing. And everybody's grief at some level goes through that. It's not at the year marker, not the 5 year marker, not at the 20-year marker, 50-year marker. It's just markers along the way. And everybody's little guideposts are in different places. And we have to be willing to let the ebb and flow of grief take us there.
Hmm. You know, when you was speaking, I did something and I wasn't aware of what I did until months later. I was talking to him, but I was talking to my nephew, which so happened to be Sheila's son. I was speaking to him, and by now he came to the house after I got released, and we were talking, and he asked me a question, and I told him when I was talking to him in the hospital, I wasn't talking to my nephew. I was talking to Sheila's son.
Hmm.
And I found out that I used him as a quote unquote as a representative of Sheila. And I subconsciously was talking to Sheila through her son, not talking to my nephew. And when I was talking to him, explaining, I began to hear myself and I was like, wow. And actually, 90% or maybe 85% of the time that I've spoken to him after Sheila passing, 85% I was talking to Sheila's son, not my nephew. You know, and I was like, man, so it made me become aware of kind of looking at him as my nephew and kind of made me more aware of, you know what, there may be some areas I have to work in because I'm actually shortchanging my nephew,
Yeah.
but I'm giving injustice to Sheila's son. That makes
Right.
sense?
I was about to say the exact same thing. You are not, at least you're cognizant of it now, right? And
Mhm.
you want to honor him as a person,
Right.
right? Because you don't, and not saying you ever did this, but you don't want to just be talking to him because it's a piece of your sister in it. You want to talk to him because you love him as your nephew.
Right.
Hey
Right.
nephew, how you doing, man? What you got going on? I'm not just trying to grab at my sister. I want to see you for who you are,
Right.
right? And that was part of your grieving process,
Yeah.
right? That you can honor her by loving her son as who he is. That's loving your sister instead of trying to grab a piece of her out of him,
Yeah.
right? And we all have done that at certain levels because it frankly it made me think about um, when one of Benita's brothers passed away, her older brother that passed away during COVID. He wasn't her oldest brother, but the older remaining brother since we got married. And his wife that he left behind, you know, I didn't see her as who she was. I saw her as Calvin's widow, right? And I was like, oh, I need to go, I need to call her and see how she's doing. But all I was really calling to see how she was doing as it related to Calvin.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It wasn't like really how she doing. It was how she doing without Calvin.
Okay.
You know what I mean? That kind of thing. And I realized I was doing that, and it's actually had me shy away from talking to her for a little while. And I'm always a person like, man, I need to call so and so, and I don't do it, right? Um, but I realized I was doing that, and I was like, you know, because I need to check on her, see how she doing. But it was always like attached to Calvin. It wasn't really just like because she was always friendly to me. She was like a sister to me, just like he was my brother. I
Mhm.
didn't call him brother-in-law. He was like a brother. Her brother was like my brothers. And she married him, so that's my sister, right? But then it was really it was hard for me to even try to talk to her because he wasn't there. Because I know eventually I was going to say, well, how's Calvin doing? Let me holler at Calvin for a minute, right? And so it's that kind of thing. So I can see how you and your nephew kind of had that too. And it's part of the grieving process because you're trying to latch on to anything that's left behind of them that you
Yeah.
can get a hold of. And so, but that's healthy, right? And that's just that yearning for someone that's not here. And so it is healthy. But I like how you, I hate to use the word mature through it, but just as you grew on your journey, you are realizing that, right? And now the relationship can be fresh and different, and you can have that internal connection with her. And that's the thing too. I think as we start to move down the journey, the things that attached us to the people that have transitioned are less needed because we realize we can have them with us 24/7 on a spiritual level. And we can sit in the spirit of them and be comforted and think about and reminisce. And we don't need the other stuff, the other attachments that remind us of them. It's like, no, my granddaughter's with me. So early on, having to play with her blankets and smell her toys, trying to get that scent of her and things like that. I don't need those things because I can sit and listen to neo soul and the right song comes on and I think about it.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
have to call nobody. I don't have to play with no toys, right? I'll listen to my contemporary gospel all day long, and the right song is ministering to me about a hopeful future with the Lord. And it's like, I'm going to see her again, right? I don't need to hold her toys and clothes for that. There's always something to remind me of her. And that's honoring her life and allowing other things to be honored without the attachment of her for me to honor them. You know,
Hmm.
and so it's just part of the process though, because early on we're just reaching at everything. And then we realize they never left. Yeah, they left physically, but they're here, right? And I jump all over the place man, like a jackrabbit when I talk about this, but I
Yeah.
think that's part of the same reason why we ache. And I know I get all a little cheesy sometime with this, but I think part of the reason why we just kind of ache in our chest and things when we lose someone we love is that now their spirit doesn't have a shell, their physical body. So their spirit is so big and vast now because they don't have that little body holding it hostage. But we do. And our spirit is trying to reach their spirit and it's reaching for them and it can't tear through our body and it makes us ache for them. And I really feel like that's kind of what's going on. It's like you just want them so bad and your spirit wants to connect and it's aching to equal the space that their spirit is in now. And it's a pleasant ache. It's a yearning for. And so yeah, but it can be a beautiful thing, man. And so just kind of lean into those things.
You said something. It made me think about the situation I was in because I remember my father's scent. And one time I was gonna grab one of his shirts. I have some of his old shirts, and I was gonna smell his scent. And right when I thought about doing that, it was like God just spoke to me and said, "Hey, hey, dude, you want a reminder of your father? Look in the mirror. You're his seed." And I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
I felt like, wow, I never. About that. And like you say, we be trying to hold on to things, but what about the individual? If
right,
we look in the mirror, remember who we came from. You know, me, it was my father. It may be somebody that may be watching. They may be grieving the loss of their mother or their grandmother or something. But remember, their blood is in your
right.
veins. You know,
And I look so much like my father now. I remember I made a joke about it at my last job. I worked at this place for 15 years and um, up on the 18th and 19th floor of a building. And the doors of the elevator are mirrored. So you can kind of see your reflection in them. And one day I wasn't paying attention, and my father was still alive then. But I remember not paying attention. I glanced up at the elevator and I scared myself because I thought my dad was standing there. But I was looking at me, and I looked so much like him. I thought I was him, and and that was years ago. But now, since my father has passed, I find myself at times now. I'm like, I do look like my dad. you
Wow.
know. And because I used to say, people used to say I really look like my mom, and it's just so crazy now that as I've aged and got a little gray or whatever else, and he didn't have as much gray as I do, honestly. But I see him so much in me, and I look at pictures of me, and it's like I look like my dad, you know, and so it's like I'm always kind of constantly reminded of his presence in me, but then it makes me sad because I'm not him. I mean, I'm a facsimile of him, right? And so yeah, but it's those things that those little God winks,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because God knows I needed to see him, and so when I glance at myself, it's like, oh, wait a minute, that's me. That ain't my dad. But when I glance at myself, sometimes I see him, and it's the little God winks that I need in those little moments. And so that's what's kind of so sweet about the journey, man. That we just along the way, we know we're never truly alone in the journey like that.
Yeah. Now, we were speaking earlier, and I have to bring this up. I wanted to make sure that I wrote it down. The conversation that we had about when we have to deal with that new norm, the
Mm.
phrase that new norm. Can you share with me? Can you share with us what you shared with me on earlier?
Yeah, I think, and we were talking about the new normal, and I don't believe there is such a thing as a new norm. I believe our journey is our journey, and it was already set before us. We just didn't know portions of it. We don't know honestly any of it, right? As we move forward, we just didn't know this would be part of our journey. It's just normal. This is just our life. And it was just odd that we always attach the words a new normal to things that are not the best things, right? Oh, my health has changed and my new normal is I got to walk with a cane, or my new normal is I'm figuring out how to live without XYZ. But we never say, oh, I got my dream house and my new normal is I have this shelter full of love and full of a family and all these memories. We never call that a new normal. Or, I have this new job and now my financial future has changed and I can get, job security and move up the corporate ladder, whatever else. We never call that the new normal, the good things of life. We call the things that we'd rather not have the new normal, right? And so I think just we need to recalibrate and think about that. That if you want to call things a new normal, call good things and not so good things that, because you didn't know that was coming. Yeah, you interviewed for the job, but it wasn't no guarantee you were gonna get it. Yeah, you wanted a dream house and you worked for it, but there was still paperwork and decisions and blessings that had to come to get that house. But we don't call those new normals. So I would just say this is your journey, and you didn't know these portions of it that you're running into. So, good or bad, they're part of your journey. So, how do you walk through them in a healthy way? How do you move forward with them? And so, I don't really lean on the new normal kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Real quick, I want to make sure for those who are just now tuning in, we have Minister Bradley Vinson. Just in case you want to call us at 888-896-1244. You must type in the access code 732-666-328 pound. That spells out reconnect. So just in case you want to call, come on the air, you're welcome to give us a call. Grief. Can you share with us, for those who may not understand about grief, can you share with us what grief is as well as the stages of grief? And is there a particular order with the grief?
Okay. Um, there's a textbook definition of grief. I'm not going to read the definition, but grief is a emotion tied to a transition or change or loss. That's what grief is. So it's an emotion and it's a state of being, but not a stage of being. I personally don't follow the stages of grief because for multiple reasons, but the main reason is that the stages of grief that have become popular were not created for people that are grieving. That's mostly marketing and what am I trying to say? Old wives' tales, so to speak, about the stages. They were never meant for people who are grieving. The stages of grief were created for the people that were terminally ill. It was a study done by Kubler Ross that wrote that book, and she studied and interviewed and just spent a lot of time with people that were terminally ill in the hospital at the time. And those were the stages they went through as they were on their way to transition, right? And if you think about it that way, the stages absolutely fit, you know, the disbelief. Oh, I'm not sick, and I'm going to be all right, right? And then you go through all those other parts of the stages of grief. I believe more so in what I call the ebb and flow of grief. Think about it as if you're in a little boat or just you out in the ocean swimming, and the waves can get high, the waves can get low. You just got to just kind of laying on the water and letting the water take you where it's going. And sometimes there's smooth waters, sometimes there's rough waters. Sometimes the waves are high, sometimes it's as smooth as glass. And that's what I consider grief as being, just the ebb and flow, the in and out. Because grief, I believe, naturally takes you towards healing. That's the process of grieving. It naturally takes you towards healing if you let it. And you have to do that by leaning in to the process of what grief is trying to take you through. And so time alone will not heal you. Putting effort into it, working at it, letting God work through you in it is what heals you. Time alone will not heal you. Time is just passing. And if you're not doing anything with it, you're trying to avoid grieving, you're trying to ignore grieving, you're trying to busy your way through grieving. That's not healing, that's avoidance. But leaning in, working through the process, journaling, talking to someone, whatever it is, but working on your grief along with time can heal you.
I was watching an episode of some show, and there was a young lady that had some surgery done. She wanted to have some surgery done because she looked too much like her mother, and she lost her mom. Um, I don't know how long it was, but she lost her mom, and she got tired of looking in the mirror and seeing her mother, and she ended up having surgery. And it made me think. I know this was definitely before I lost my dad, but I believe it was after, sometime after I lost Sheila. But I was thinking, I'm like, man, what if I was in her shoes? You know, we never can say what we'll do unless things happen.
Right.
And, I couldn't beat up her because she lost her mom. And, some people may say I resemble my father, I resemble my dad or whatever, but, and it made me think about how sometimes identical twins, when one goes and when it come down to the service, here come the other identical twin, then there's a reminder that person looks like the person we're grieving. It's so many things that go on when people grieve, and it make you have a heart of, Lord, thank you it ain't me. Sometimes some people's shoes are way too big for us to put on.
Yeah, and I'll say it this way too, that this other gentleman gave the analogy: when you see a plane up in the sky, from the ground, the plane is just easing through the sky, right? But you don't see the turbulence. You don't see how snug them seats are on some people. You don't see how rough the ride might actually look because you're not in the plane.
Right.
And when we're looking at people's lives, sometimes we're like, oh, they're fine, because we're seeing it from the ground and they on the plane, right? And so we have to realize that some people are being shaken, but it's not visible to us. And so, just like I said, as long as they're doing it in a healthy way, they're grieving appropriately. Now, going under the knife because you're grieving, but like I said, that's not for me to decide, right? And it's not required that somebody grieve like I want them to for it to be valid.
Right.
Whatever you're grieving, however you're grieving, is valid for you, and vice versa. I don't want nobody telling me how to grieve. I would if I was doing it in an unhealthy way, but if I'm not grieving like you want me to grieve, keep that to yourself,
Right. Right. Right.
right? Because, and as a griever, I'm not responsible for how somebody responds to how I'm grieving. If I'm a naturally emotional person and I just cry at the drop of a hat, and you always like, man, why are you crying so much? Just feel how you feel about me crying. I'm not responsible for trying to take up for how you feel about me grieving, right? And we have to, so it's a two-sided coin. If you're grieving and you're doing it in a healthy way and you're doing the best you can, but there's triggers everywhere, stop trying to make yourself responsible for how somebody's responding to you grieving. On the flip side, stop trying to deputy dog how somebody's grieving, especially if they're grieving in a healthy way. Now, here's a definition I feel of a healthy way: not self medicating. We all grown, probably on this call right now. What is self medicating? Taking medication you don't need, number one, and liquid medication. You self medicating, you ain't prescribed that, you ain't taking that for good reason. That's trying to numb the pain. That is not healthy. You doing way out in left field stuff that you didn't do before your loss. Now you go to Mexico every year and go run with the bulls. And now you took up MMA fighting. And now you taking up cliff diving and all this other stuff. It's like, so you want to get that close to death, but not kill yourself. That ain't healthy, right? And you need someone to step into your life and speak into that. But if you cocooning, and what I mean by that, or kind of how men go in a man cave and you standing there an extra time that you longer than you stayed before, that ain't unhealthy. That's part of the grieving. I don't want to be around people. I want to sit. It's hard for me to get out of bed. I don't want to eat right now. Right. And now at a certain level, that starts to get a little unhealthy, but it's like, man, chew on a cracker. Even if you ain't got an appetite, chew on something, put something in your mouth, drink a bottle of water, keep a bottle of water with you. I know you're going to have insomnia, but go lay down. Even if your eyes pop open every 3 hours, just stay in bed, lay there, try to sleep. Right. And so you're doing the things to help you in grief, but it's going to take a while. That's healthy. That's normal. You're a normal person having a normal reaction to this new abnormal thing in your life, grief. That's different than doing it in an unhealthy way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because you don't like that they just sit in their rooms and listen to music in the dark, that ain't unhealthy. That's just uncomfortable for you.
Right.
They ain't hurting themselves. They ain't self-medicating. They just sitting, listening to music. And that's just helping them through where they are in their grief in the moment. It don't matter that you're uncomfortable about that. Let them grieve, right? And so we have to really understand what healthy grieving and non-healthy grieving is. And we're going to go through periods of everything's a trigger. We're going to go through periods of I can't get out of bed today. We're going to go through that, but that's not unhealthy. That's normal. And we got to stop trying to analyze and be somebody's bootleg therapist and all this in their grief when they're doing it in a healthy way. They just don't feel like talking right now.
Yeah.
But be a friend, be present, call every now and then. And one day they're going to pick up and say, hey, man, appreciate you calling. But that might take 3 months, right? That ain't unhealthy. That's just you ran out of patience of riding with them through that. And that's okay too, right? That just wasn't your capacity at the time. Circle back when you can and start supporting. But we have to stop trying to analyze how everybody's grieving. Because that's probably one of the biggest questions I get from people that love somebody that's grieving. What if they're not grieving right? What if they're not for? Are they self medicating? Are they doing self harm? Are they doing some extreme type thing they didn't do before the loss? Well, no, they just don't like shopping no more. They don't. Okay, leave him alone. Well, he don't mow his yard no more. He used to mow his yard. Okay, you go mow it, right? Because they always want to ask me how to help somebody grieve. Help them grieve by taking out the trash.
Right.
Help them grieve by washing their car. Help them grieve by you go grocery shopping for them and bringing it back to the house. That's how you help them grieve, right? It's the practical side. It's to be present instead of what kind of formula do I need to make them grieve at a pace that's comfortable for me. We got to get over that.
Can you also share? I love how you said some time ago when you talking to someone that's grieving, just because you see one drop of tear fall to their eyes, there's not the need to get a Kleenex.
Right.
Can you share that
Yeah.
analogy?
I kind of do it, and it sounds a little funny, but I always say, wait for the snot.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is when people cry in front of us, we get uncomfortable. We go get tissue for them, but we're unconsciously saying, please stop crying. And that's doing them a disservice. So when I coach people on grief, or when I'm doing trainings on grief, there's tissue boxes on the table. Or if I'm at a table somewhere, there's a tissue box there, but I'm not going to hand them a tissue. I'll have them accessible where they can get them on their own, but I'm not going to push a tissue on anybody because I want them to be able to cry and create a safe space for them to do that and to release. Now, usually I'll wait until they're about done because you can see their nose is starting to run. Then I hand them a tissue. That's what I mean. Wait for the snot. So, wipe their nose because by that time you're about done crying. Now, because put it this way, have you ever noticed when someone starts crying and you hand them a tissue, what do they usually say? I'm sorry. Because now they feel like they've hurt you by showing emotion. They're sorry for crying. Now imagine that. They're showing a true, vulnerable, transparent emotion to a pain they have, and they're apologizing to you for showing that emotion because you handed them a tissue with good intent because you thought you were helping, but you're basically saying, please stop crying. Right? And we've been trained on both sides of that to hand the tissue, but we've also been trained to apologize for our emotions. Our most vulnerable, transparent emotions, we've been taught to say, I'm sorry. I'm apologizing for showing emotion, for showing that I love somebody that's now gone. Right. So, and it's just, look, I mean, now we know better. You know better, do better. Right. There's no fault in that. You're doing what you know, you're doing what you feel is right. But I say, try it a different way for a little while. And even if they grab a tissue and they start saying, I'm sorry, say, sorry for what? Don't be sorry. I'm happy that you feel safe enough to do that in front of me. And so I want to create a safe space for you to be able to do that. And I don't mind you crying, and say that, say those words. Say you want to create a safe space for them to be who they are. Thank you for crying in front of me, letting me into that emotion, right? And so we just have to let's do things a little different. So I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. Even for us to use wisdom when we in the presence of someone who's grieving, sometimes our presence is enough.
Yeah.
We don't have to try to find words. It bothers me. It bothers me when I'm around someone that's grieving and there are other people that's closer to them and they end up just really just not allowing that person to express themselves. They over talking that person, or they. But see, you just got to have some faith.
Yeah, the need to be profound does a lot more harm than we think it does.
Yes.
A lot of times we just have to sit in it, and we have to stop over spiritualizing grief. Love much, grieve much. We were never told that grieving was bad. That's a misinterpretation of scripture. It says, do not grieve as a non believer or as a person that has no hope. We have a hope. So grieving does not make it seem like we have no faith or no hope. It said, don't grieve like people who have no hope, because we have hope. Grieve like a person that has hope. But the word here is still grieve, right? And we have to stop over spiritualizing grief and seeing it for what it is. We are human. Yes, we know we win at the end. That does not mean we don't get to cry at the sad parts. And on top of that, and I kind of almost explain it to kids this way. Imagine you have your favorite book and it has your favorite characters in it. And you're reading that book and everything is great. And then all of a sudden, your favorite character in the book dies. But there's more pages left in the book. There's more story left. That's how our life is. And along the way, as we keep flipping the pages of our life, of our life's book, characters are going to leave. They're going to transition. They might die. They might disappear for chapters of the book, then show back up later on. That's our life's story. And there's ups and downs in life. There's grief in life. And we have to be able to walk through that wholly as people. WHO holy, not just HOLY holy, right? And we have to, we're whole beings, and we have a whole spectrum of emotions, and we should be allowed to feel that. And I say this all the time: fractured faith is still faith, right? Bruised faith is still faith, because it's said in scripture, the size of a mustard seed. Don't you think most of us have more faith than a mustard seed? So even when it's fractured, we got enough to count. Even when it's bruised, we have enough of it to count still as faith. But it don't mean that we can't grieve, man. It's so hard to walk this journey when people are thinking, because we're grieving for a month, we've grieved too long because ain't you saved and ain't you this? And I
Yeah.
keep thinking,
Yeah.
this person has never really lost, or this person hasn't even fully had an opportunity to grieve, especially if they're saying that to someone else.
Yeah.
So you're telling me you never had a loss in your life that you couldn't get over in a couple of months? So you always got over something in a month or two, and you should be fine. Because I go to church and I pray. I mean, and I tell it as part of my story. People used to call us to pray for them. And then, when our loss happened, I couldn't even pray. I felt all I had was grief talk and sad talk for God, and He didn't want to hear that. And it literally took me having to pray for someone else in the midst of my grief to get the conversation going again with me and God. Because God was like, okay, you ain't gonna talk to me for yourself. I'm gonna bring somebody into your life that needs you to talk to me for them. Because God still brought people in our lives that, in a way, I felt ignored my grief. And almost a kind of, how dare you ask me to pray for you? Don't you know I'm grieving? I just buried my granddaughter, and you calling me to pray for you? But something in me said, they asked you to pray for them. You need to pray for them. And that pulled me back into God's presence. I didn't get unsaved because I was grieving.
Right.
I'm grieving. And we got to stop doing that to ourselves and stop allowing other folks to do that to us. And the church is at, I don't call it at fault, but the church can do better. Because and it's a running, I don't want to call it a joke, but a running thing even amongst the chaplain community about the church is excellent at the point of death of your loved one. From the point of death of your loved one to the funeral time, the church is excellent. As soon as that funeral is over and they feed you a little chicken and clean that church up, they done. They moving on. That train gone. And we're left in the wake, coming to church grieving. And half the church avoids us because we're grieving, like the plague. And the other half want to give us all these, pontifications about faith and spirit and God and trying to be profound and not be present with us. And we're just in this lost stage. And the church isn't doing much with us. That's part of the reason I train churches on caring for the grieving among them past the funeral, right? Just simple things, talking about grief in a sermon, having a grief group, sending them cards on special days to let them know that you're thinking about their loved one that passed on. Just even practical things, right? And it's like, that's part of the human condition. So why are we talking so much about saving people and talking to people about, how to transition and be a better person? But then when the trials of life happen, we rate them on how spiritual they are, right?
Mm.
And so we really have to figure that stuff out. And forgive me for looking down.
No, no, you're fine. You're fine. Yeah, I'm gonna share this while you're doing that. Even as ministers, we have to make sure that we allow ourselves to grieve. A lot of times we'll put our grief on hold. I've been guilty of it. And unfortunately, we we put it to the side, but we don't go back to it. I remember when we did lose our sister, I was talking to my dad and I called him and I said, Daddy, I said, I need to tell you something. I said, I don't want to talk to Pastor Prater. I don't want to talk to Pastor Prater. I want to talk to Daddy. Look, I said, Pastor Prater lost a member. A member could be replaced, but Daddy lost a daughter. I said, that's who I want to talk to. And I said, Daddy, and I actually told my dad and I told my mother, I said, I can't say I know how you feel because I lost a sister, but you lost a daughter. I said, now I know who that person is, but this time I want you to just be Daddy, and he was very appreciative of us having a conversation. And for the first time, I saw my daddy, I saw Pastor Prater as a human.
And that's so special because it's unfortunate. A lot of times, our churches don't allow our leadership, especially a pastor,
Yeah.
to be human because we expect that person to be a super person and take our calls at 2 o'clock in the morning and come to our hospital bedside and see about our loved ones. So when it's their turn, who's there for them? And a lot of pastors deal with that when they're not allowed to be human. And I have pastor friends, and I'll give a little bit of the story without revealing who they are because that part of it's not really important. But they lost loved ones, went and funeralized their loved one out of town, and was back in the pulpit the next Sunday. And then they mentioned that they went and ministered for their loved one. And I ran into him after church, and I'm like, you need to be human. You need some time off. This church ain't gonna fall down without you here. You served us well. You have other leaders in this church. And for those people that are not allowing you to be leaders, to be a man, to be a human, to be a husband, to be a son, shame on them. And I said it in a leadership meeting because people will give lip service to it. Well, yeah, pastor should sit down. No, you say, Pastor, we got you the next month.
Yeah.
Now, if you don't want to come to church at all, fine. But if you do, come sit in the pulpit. But you ain't got to preach. You ain't got to take no phone calls. Deacon so-and-so going to take them phone calls. You ain't got to do nothing for the next month. That's how you love on your pastor. And if anybody call you directly, let it go to voicemail, check the voicemail, and then give us the call. And we'll return the call. We got to have more churches willing to do that. Make your pastor go sit down. Make them take time to at least start their grieving process. Because I'm going to tell you like this, when we lovingly add pressure on them to do that, the church sees the example of a grieving believer. And they get permission to do that and not try to be over spiritual through it and not try to be, I'm so saved, I can't grieve. That's from the top down.
Right.
That's the head of that house saying, I'm hurting. And I'm not going to preach for, my father passed away and I'm going to take some time off, y'all. I'll see y'all in 2 or 3 weeks. And we have to give them space to do that where they don't feel so obligated and our church isn't so needy that they're not allowing them to be human and grieve. Because I'm telling you right now, man, and I'm probably stepping on some folks' toes right now because it's like, oh, and they were called to serve. Yeah, but they human. They love someone that's not here.
Right.
Jesus wept. Jesus he cried blood tears at a certain point from his agony, internal hurting. You don't think that's grieving?
Right.
Now, did he grieve Lazarus because, he saw the grief of Lazarus' sisters and he felt that grief? So he had empathy and he cried. That's one way he could have been crying. Another way he could have been crying because Lazarus was his friend and he was sad. Another way he was crying could be because he knew right in that moment, Lazarus was in the bosom of the Lord, of his Father. And he knew that he was about to bring him back to this sinful world. He was taking him from the place that was the best place he could be in the bosom of his Father. And he about to bring him back to this fallen world. That would make me grieve. Right? And so we have to see that for what it is and stop over spiritualizing grief. I'm saved and grieving. I call myself a grieving believer. That's who I am. And that's who I want to serve. And we have to give ourselves that space. It don't make you less than because you're grieving. It don't make you less saved because you're grieving. Because I tell people this also, sometimes we take that pain and we internalize it and we act like if we don't internalize it and stay hurt, we didn't love. And I used to lie to people and say, always grieving, ing, on this side of eternity. I'm sorry, always healing, ing, on this side of eternity, never healed, ed, until we transition and we're with the Lord. And God had to drop that into my spirit that I was lying to people. Because the reason I was lying is, even at that point, and I'm teaching people, this is about a year into me teaching people, maybe even longer than a year. And I'm teaching people this, and I'm thinking I'm doing this great exploits for the Lord, for grieving believers. And God had to shake me and said, why are you lying to these people? They can be healed, ed, on this side of eternity. But you have to give God access to your pain. Because if you're a grieving believer and you have a void in your life from a loss, God knows the exact dimensions of that void, the depth, the width, everything. Because He created you, He created them, He knows the void. But we have to give Him access to the void to heal it. And I give the analogy of surgery. Now, I always play and say, if I took my shirt off, you can see the scars from me having surgery. But surgery, after surgery, the doctor look at you, he wheel you out the room and he wake you up, and essentially he tells you you're healed. But you have scars that are the evidence of surgery. That's what grief is. So you give God access to that void, give Him access to the pain, give Him access to what that is, and He works on it. And I'm healed, but there's evidence of work being done because of the scars. But we have to give Him access. But we keep saying, no, God, no, my pain shows I loved. And God is like, let me work on it. Let me do surgery on that thing. It's not erasing them, and you can be healed, but there's going to be evidence of work being done. But you got to give Him access. He ain't going to make you give Him access. It's just like salvation. But that little, I call it the little cheesy painting of Jesus outside of the door with no knob on the outside. He ain't going to open the door and go in. He knocking. You got to open the door from the inside. That's how your grief is too. He out here knocking. Let me heal you. Let me heal you. But you got to open the door and give Him access to that spot. And we have to do that. We got to give each other space to do that.
Yeah. And you know, it's like you say, it's healthy for us, and also for us to be able to get the help that we need. We also loving them and also loving ourselves. We can't do ourselves a disservice, because if we think about not just the person that we're grieving over, who we love, but if we think about who they loved, which is us,
Right.
that'll help us to honor them more by taking care of us. They don't want us to, like you said, get on a hunger strike or neglect ourselves. You know, it was actually 6 months after I lost Sheila. I'll never forget, one November, 6 months later, on a Thursday, I was getting up to go to work. And when I got up, it hit me. I looked around and it dawned on me. I didn't just lose my sister, I lost my friend. That was so profound. And I was like, man, I lost my friend. I lost a girl that I used to sneak in the house. Now we grown. Instead of bringing some girl to the house, I would say, "Hey Sheila, I got the house to myself. Come on over." And we just sit up, act crazy, and all that stuff. We used to talk in the middle of the night, and I thought about, that's who I lost.
Right.
And I was like, man, so I had to accept the realization, and then now figure out how I was going to be able to do things in a healthy way. There are some songs, um, Keith Sweat, certain songs I can't listen to because it made me think about her, because there were some songs that we used to sing together. And so, just like with me, there may be somebody that may be watching that's grieving. And matter of fact, I do have to give a special acknowledgement to my stepmother, Emily Prater. Um, After my dad left, I became that pit bull. Now, of course, she have three grown sons, bigger and taller than me. But I was kind of watching over those who may be in her ear,
Mm.
because I'm used to hearing the foolishness. And I say Officer Prater, but Brother Prater wasn't so nice. I was ready to look, hang up the phone in some people's face, because she lost her husband. Yeah, she the first lady and all that stuff, but people were still calling her, asking her, "Can you pray for me? Can you help me?" And this was even before the funeral. This was before the funeral, and I'm like, "Can't you see this woman is grieving?" I got an attitude.
Yeah.
And so, you know, so I wanted to acknowledge her and thanking her for everything that she's done and even helping me. But there are some that may be watching that don't know how to get that out. They are aware that there's a umph there. They may not know how to release it. Can you speak to those people who may even be stuck or
Yeah.
whatever the Lord laid upon your heart about this topic of grief? Can you share at this time?
Yeah. My thing is, I mean, bluntly with that, lean in. You have to you have to honor yourself with letting grief do what it does. Don't fear the process or the true ebb and flow of grief. And it takes time, right? And there's practical things to that. Just spending time to, express yourself, whether it's on paper or to someone. Connect with other people that are grieving or that are not grieving, right? You have to engage with people. You have to lean into your grief and work through it. Um, and the thing about it is, like, most people don't realize this when they're actually stuck, is that grief will take its time. I don't mean like slowly take its time. I mean snatch time from you. It will take its time. And what I mean by that, when you don't lean into the process and try to heal. Let me read some devotionals. Let me talk to someone. Let me join a grief group. Let me journal. Let me express myself. I always wanted to. I'm kind of artistic, so let me write poetry or whatever ways to express my grief. When you don't do those things, grief will surprise you. So one day you in the store, or one day you're presenting in a meeting at work, and grief just jumps on your back and won't let go. Grief will, and I'm not trying to scare you into that, but you can't build. I tell men, you can't build enough birdhouses, fix enough cars, watch enough movies, play enough golf, do enough shopping, do enough cooking, whatever the thing is. You can't do enough of that stuff not to grieve. And I've met people that couldn't truly grieve for 30 years after their loss. And I just imagine what was their life like for those 30 years where they never had a true release, where they could say, I'm grieving and let me walk myself through this. Don't let that happen, right? And there's going to be periods of stuckness, like I said, right? You just want to. It's going to be hard to get out of bed. It's going to be like I'm just in that reminiscing stage, and I just want to sit and listen to music by myself. Now, some people see that as stuck. I just see that as part of the process, right? And we love people, and we don't want them stuck. But also, remember now, as long as they're doing it in a healthy way, it's okay. And because the stuckness is, I'm all right, and they know they're lying about it, or I'm over that, and they know they're truly not. Because I can't read the inner workings of a man's heart. Now we can use spiritual discernment and be like, well, I don't think you're all right, right? You tell me you are, but I just want you to know I'm here. If you just need somebody to come sit with you, and I'll sit and listen. I promise I won't say nothing. I'm not going to try to fix you. I'm just saying, if you don't want to be alone, let me come sit with you. Right. And so that kind of thing, right? Because it's like people are fearful of people trying to fix them. And so they do cocoon and they don't lean in. And then we say they stuck because they won't let us fix them. Right. But always remember, everyone is the expert of their own grief journey. And we have to let them heal in their own way. Right. And stuckness, sometimes there's some outward showing of stuckness. And a couple of ways I see that is the woe is me, always angry with everyone. Right. Oh, you lost your mom. You don't know loss unless you lost a daughter. like you're comparing griefs and stuff like that, like my
Right.
grief is greater than yours, and how dare this, so a lot of times that kind of shows up as anger and processing, and no one is as bad off as I am. Some of that is stuckness, because you're not saying everybody's grief is the worst grief they've ever experienced, period. The worst day of my life at that point was the loss of my granddaughter. The next worst day of my life was the loss of my dad. So how dare I say, man, you don't know loss unless you lost your dad because you lost a sister. How dare I? That was the worst day of your life that day. Right. And so that's stuckness. That's how stuckness kind of starts showing itself. Like that, woe is me, your woe ain't as deep as mine. It's like, no, that's your journey. You got to walk through that, and you got to release some of that, because how dare I expect you to grieve my loss? That's my loss. Right. And so we have to, it's a maturing, it's a grinding, it's a, um, it's a purification through grief that we got to realize that's our journey. And sometimes that stuckness is, well, why ain't they loving on me? Why ain't they catering to me? And some of that creates that stuckness. And we got to, I mean, and I hate to say it this way, but at a certain level, we have to realize it's our journey alone to walk. Now, some people can walk some of it with us, but nobody can walk all of it with us other than God. Because even the loss that you shared, all three of the brothers, I think what you said is three of y'all, right? All three of the brothers lost a different version of that sister.
Right.
So
Right.
some of it y'all walking like this, some of it y'all walking like that. And as you walk your journeys, the parts that you're together like this, cool. The parts you're doing this, that's where understanding comes in. And then it's like, yeah, man, remember them jokes she used to tell? That's that part. But then you remember your little outside joke only you had with her. So now you over here. You see what I'm saying? And
Yes.
that's that mutual loss and loving on each other, because we both understand that piece of it. And then when we get to that part where we don't understand, that's where just understanding as far as loving them and that individual part is the good part, right?
Mhm.
And not being like, man, uh, why can't he let me in there? Because that ain't your journey. That's his alone. He can let you walk alongside of it, but he'll probably never let you in it. And that's okay. My wife and I, we both lost Alana, our granddaughter. But there's parts of it, even only as a woman, that she understands. Because I remember my wife said, the legacy of motherhood is now gone. It's
Mm.
because we have four grand boys, and she was our only granddaughter. Now, we don't know if anybody's going to ever have a little girl before we leave this earth. We don't know. But to my wife, that was the last opportunity for motherhood, was our granddaughter. And when my wife said that, I grieved for my wife. But that was never a thought in my mind.
Right.
Now I thought, man, she'll never get married. Man, she'll never have kids. But I didn't think about it as that's the severing of motherhood for the family. Right. So that was me and my wife walking like that. But I had empathy for her and that portion of the journey that's not meant for me. Right. And so we have to do that for each other. And we have to also understand, my wife as a woman understood that, my husband might not get this, but I'm going to tell him anyway, knowing that I'm going to lean in and love on her, even if I don't understand motherhood. Right. But I love my wife and she's hurting. That's how I can get close to that. I can never get close to what motherhood is. Right. And we have to be willing to be that for each other. And even be able to share with people parts of our journey that they don't understand, or they can get close to, but they can be close to us, not that part of the journey, right? Because we can support each other in presence, support each other even though we don't understand, support each other even if we don't know all the inner workings of it. That's just empathy and love, right? And so we have to be willing to give that to someone as far as being transparent, but also understanding they can never touch this piece, but I'm going to let them walk next to me, right? And so, yeah, man, it's not an easy journey. Um, God willing, at we all will experience grief in our life, and at some point, somebody's going to grieve us. Because if we're loved by somebody, at some point we're going to say goodbye to them, relationally, physically, whatever it is. And I understand I'm not going to outlive all the people that love me. So one day they're going to grieve me. But while I'm here, I want to help them have the tools so they can walk that journey well, right? And so, yeah, that's what it's all about, man. It's our favorite characters in our story sometimes die, sometimes move on, um, and we're going to experience loss because of them, or because of other things, to even ourselves as a character. That's part of the journey.
Yeah. um, Great way of saying that. Years ago when Michael Jackson died, right after he passed away, Janet Jackson was on the Grammys, I believe. She came up on there and she said, "To the world, he was the greatest entertainer, but to us, he was family." And so many times we don't think about that. Now, yeah, lost one of the greatest entertainers, Prince, Michael Jackson, those people. But to Janet, that was Big Brother. And for us to be able to recognize that we have lost someone in our life, we become the fellow grievers, uh, regardless of who you lost. A
Right.
loss is a loss. And, it's something about when you lose that first person that was dear to your heart, it seems like you become more aware of other grievers.
Hmm.
It's like, man, matter of fact, when I went back to work after losing Sheila, there were so many people that approached me that said they lost their sister or they lost their loved one, but they didn't have that voice. And they kind of, I guess, used me as their voice. I was their voice to other grievers that were in either the situation of losing a sister or domestic violence or whatever. And also, I do have to say this before I forget. Also, even how a person leaves, that matters to grief also. My sister, when she left, she was murdered. My father, natural causes. Those are two separate deaths, and you have to respect them as such. And so with those that may be watching who may be grieving, when you lose someone, please take out that time for YOU. You'd be surprised how much damage we put upon ourselves, health wise,
Right.
mentally. You'd be surprised how much weight that we put upon ourselves. We hear that song, "Oh, what needless pains we bear,
All
all
because we
because
didn't
we do
care.
not carry everything to God in prayer," and that includes grief.
Right.
So, as we get ready to wrap it up, can you give us a final thought and then lead us into a word of prayer?
Yes. Um, I'll just say that first, I believe we honor our loved ones through doing our best to walk our journey well, the portion of our journey that we're walking without them physically here. Um, I truly believe that learning how to carry them in a different way, not leave them behind, but carrying them forward in a different way through our love and our connection to them means a lot to how we honor their life. And I just want to encourage us all to take that time to honor them by trying to have joy again. Joy and grief can hold hands. And as we continue our journeys of life, we're going to have bits of both. Early on, it might be a lot of grief or a lot of pain, a lot of hurt, with a little joy, and then a little more joy. And then they start to equal. Then you're going to have more days of joy and less days of pain. And it's going to ebb and flow. But I believing that you have a right or have an expectation to have joy in your life also is a way of honoring the life they had here physically. So I want to leave you with that you do deserve joy, and you are allowed to pursue joy after loss. I think that's one of the biggest things that our biggest gift I can give you is that pursue joy, pursue joy, and lean in. So with that, I will pray us out, and I want you all to be hopefully that this tonight's talk was a blessing for you or helped you in some way. And prayerfully, I'll be back here again to share with you all and break bread in this kind of format and be able to talk with you all. So here we are. We just thank you, God, for this opportunity to come together, God, in a form of worship and honoring you, God, by leaning on you, God, and knowing that you're always here with us to walk us through those hardest parts of our life, God. You are with us when the sun is shining and when there's rain. You are there, God. And through our storms of life, God, you can help us rise above that storm, God. Help us through the storm, God. Take the storm away. And sometimes, God, you are there next to us in the storm, holding the umbrella. God, help us to recognize all those different phases of it, God. But regardless, we know that what part of the journey we are in, God, you're never too uncomfortable to be in that part of the journey with us, God. Help us to seek you. Help us to seek others, God, that are here walking amongst us, God, that are willing and have the heart to walk with us in this journey, if it was just for some portion. And those of us, God, that have experienced loss or not have experienced loss, let us be willing to walk with others, God, to show your love to them, God. Help us to be that kind of friend, that kind of confidant, that kind of peacemaker, that kind of person that wants to be a presence for those who are hurting. And God, we want your blessing over us, God, as we go through this tough season, literally, God, with the weather and all these different things happening, God. Please keep us in our best health, God, and have those that are to be healthy and to stay safe in the midst of all this, God. Ask for your prayer and your blessings over all those that are within earshot of this video tonight, God, and all those represented by this video and this gathering tonight, God, by the people who love them or the people that have transitioned and are in your bosom right now. We love you, God. We love one another. And we just thank you, God, for being your people. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen. I thank each and every one of y'all for tuning in. For those who may want to reach out to Minister Vinson, can you give us your information for them to reach out to you?
Yes, the easiest way to find me is on Facebook, probably where hopefully a lot of you guys might be watching right now. Just look for me by name, Bradley Vinson. My picture is there, so you know it's me. I think there might be another Bradley Vinson out there somewhere. And also on LinkedIn, I'm there by my name, Bradley Vinson. And I have a website, bradleyvinson.com. So please check me out in those different formats. I have a way to reach out to me through email or through Messenger. So I'm always available to talk to people and just share and hopefully give you a good word or some resources to help you or help someone you care about that's on this hardest of journeys.
Also, he for those that are leaders or those who may have a church or a church home, he is available for booking pertaining to grief, pertaining to finances, pertaining to other topics. What other topics are you specialize in?
Well, I really, God has had me reduce down really to the area of grief
Okay.
and
Okay.
serving those who are grieving, helping churches be more grief aware and grief ready.
Okay.
And that is my calling now, to serve churches in that way. So I'm really in the space of hope and healing people that are grieving. So if churches are trying to get ready, or trying to start grief ministries, or just have their staff be more grief ready, or to serve those who are hurting, I would love to come spend time with you and equip your people.
Yes. Yes, we definitely gonna have you back, and I thank you so much for the words you shared, the prayer, but also the friendship on a personal note. The friendship, everything you. I mean, it's very hard for people to trust people, but I thank you for earning our trust. Thank you for earning my trust on a personal note. And I thank God for you, thank God for your wife. And I'm so glad that my little brother Walter knew y'all.
Man, yeah,
I thank God for it. You've definitely been a blessing to me and also to this show. And so thank you for the life that you live, because if you were anyone less than who you are, I don't think God would have had you on my heart right after I got out of a coma. So I thank God for you. And this has really blessed me. And I hope for those who may be grieving, regardless of how long you've grieved, please take out time for you. And I hope that there was something that was said that ministered to your heart to encourage you. But also, what we always say, don't forget about that person that's in your mirror. And so I thank Minister Vinson being here on the show. And I want to encourage each and every one of y'all, please stay warm. Use wisdom. If you don't need to go out, don't go out. If you have to go out, if you are an essential worker, please be careful. We're praying for you. We cover you. And know that when you do make it home safe, Lord, when you do go to work, make it to work, please let somebody know. There are other people that are praying for you. People are praying for you. And so, once again, I want to thank each and every one of y'all for tuning in. And thank you so much for listening to Reconnect My Heart podcast. God bless you and good night.
right.